Okay, this is the second try. One of my kitties decided to help with this. I'm Lee, aka Revolution 724. I am wearing these blisteringly butch pajamas because with a little kitty on them that says "just a cat nap," because they were a gift from my Christmas gift from my very sweet mother. And they're comfortable. And so I'm wearing them and I don't care. This is me being comfortable with my gender expression, even if it's not corresponding to certain stereotypes. So my real purpose in making this video, this is the evening of Christmas Day. It's about 7 o'clock. So before we get too far into the post-holiday season, I just wanted to address something about Yule, or Alban Arthwin, as the Druid Grove that I work with calls it. Now, I am not an expert in all things mythology. This is my foster kitten, Henri. He says hello. I am not an expert in all things folklore. It is an area, particularly as it pertains to pagan spirituality, that I am currently working to learn more about. So there very well may be gaps in my knowledge, gaps in my understanding. But the going narrative that I think of and hear of with regard to Yule is that it marks the midpoint of the war between the Holly King and the Oak King. And that results in the Oak King's already been defeated at Samhain, but he really dies for real at Yule as a result of mortal injuries sustained during this conflict, and then he's kind of comes back after having been symbolically burned in a funeral pyre that is the Yule log, until he reaches full power at Bealtaine, and then conquers the Holly King, and the cycle kind of goes the other way. So I have issues. Now I will note here that I am not a great proponent or devotee of the divine feminine. I think that it has a place, but it's not like some pagans are extremely goddess oriented and do the whole maiden mother crone thing, and are all about connecting with mother goddesses and all that kind of stuff. I have no objection to that. I have no objection to that in theory. In practice, I don't relate to it very strongly at all. Blisteringly butch pink kitty pajamas notwithstanding, I actually identify as non-binary. I have a lot of discomfort and alienation from feminine archetypes. I would say I have more alienation from them than I do from masculine archetypes, really. I have a foster kitten who's biting my foot right now. This is the reality of living with pets. Anyway, so all that to say, I'm not here trying to push a goddessy agenda or anything like that. That's actually really not my bag. I kind of don't have an interest in women's spirituality as such for that reason. But having said that, holly trees actually are sex differentiated. That is to say that if you see a holly tree that has the bright red berries on it, that is a female holly tree. The male holly trees do not make the berries, unless it's an intersex holly tree. And there may be exceptions, and I'm not purporting to anything as to how the tree identifies. It's not anything to do with that. But biologically, in order to produce berries, the tree has to have ovaries, and it has to have access to holly sperm, for lack of a better, pollen coming from a male holly tree. So if you ever see a holly tree that has red berries, that's a holly tree that have ovaries, and the other ones don't. If they don't have berries, either they don't have anyone to fertilize them, or they don't have ovaries because they're male. They're botanically male, let's say. So if to my mind, that means that if you were looking at an aspect of holly that has that is crowned with bright red berries, or a crown with bright red berries on it, that is, and not to endorse any binary gender standards or anything, but I think that's a queen's crown, and that's fine. No objection there, but it does call into question some aspects of how the narrative is presented. And I also so I have a holly tree and a oak tree very close together in my yard, and you can see where the narrative has come from at the time that the oak is turning colors and losing its leaves because it's deciduous. The holly near it is evergreen, and at the time of Yule, the oak has completely lost its leaves, and the holly is looking lush and healthy and has bright red berries on it because it's a girl. And it seems to me, so I can see the final death of the oak king and the supremacy of the holly king from that perspective, but I also see it in a more cooperative and collaborative perspective, as during a time of the year which is that it is supposed to be very sparse, and animals have a difficult time finding food, and produce is not being produced. All of the harvest has already been taken in. The holly continues to produce food that is able to can't sustain people. People can't eat holly berries, they're poisonous, but birds eat them. It may not be their favorite food, but it will sustain them, and they can eat them without harming themselves in some of the bleakest months of the winter. So during a time when the oak tree, with the acorns that would have been squirreled away by squirrels in the fall for longer term storage, and thus are no longer available, the holly has come into light, and it remains productive and fertile, and providing of food to at least some of the woodland animals. And it strikes me that is like, it is a tree that has it has some defense mechanisms. It has spines as a general rule. Not all holly trees or shrubs have spines, but many of them do. It has berries that are not particularly appealing to the general public as food, but at a time when the oak can no longer sustain and promote life, the holly emerges. It stands against the brown and white if you live in a place that has snow, which I don't necessarily get a lot of snow here in Georgia, but against those drab winter colors, it you can see the green and red that would otherwise, you know, fade into the rest of the underbrush and not be noticeable and observable. And yet, in the summer, when the oak has come back into its full strength and capacity, I guess, as an offer of shelter, and you know, as the time goes into the early fall, a provider of food in the form of acorns. I can see the two kind of handing off and acting in a, you know, in a cyclical like flow, that provides there is an ebb and flow of what might generally be considered a more abundant and more giving plant, but it may not be as lush as the holly may not be as lush as the oak, but it is steadfast. The oak is symbolic, emblematic, I think that was the word I was looking for, of toughness and discipline and stout-heartedness and stalwartness, but it's the more fragile, prickly, bitter holly that is able to proceed even through the times in the winter that the oak is barren and not able to provide or protect life. Moreover, I'll notice as I walk around my neighborhood and observe some of the very large trees that we have around here, that during the winter the oak can't provide food, but it will drop limbs for firewood. Holly you could use for firewood, but it's a thin, twiggy, not substantial kind of tree like an oak is. So it is more helpful to the environment and to the people and to the birds. Well, if the birds are eating it, then the birds have some meat on their bones and thus are useful as food if you are hunting them. Well, it's not good as firewood, but it is good at least providing a bit of a candle in the dark in the winter time, for wildlife and by extension for humans. So I wonder, all this to say, I wonder if it's possible to conceive of as the oak queen falls dormant, her sister, the holly, steps her quieter, her shyer, her more fragile looking sister, the holly, keeps vigil by her bedside until she is strong enough to take the dominant role again. And a sense of the holly end of the year as being a caretaking of a keeping of the fires burning, while the easier, richer parts of the year rest and build their resources so that they can be productive during the warmer and sunnier months. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a matter of dominance. I think it can be a matter of different aspects having different strengths, and one becoming coming to the forefront when the other is needing to rest, needing to be cared for instead of caring. There are also scientists who talk about how trees can communicate with one another and provide oxygen to one another even. So trees take in oxygen through their leaves. A deciduous tree is not going to be able to take in, at least not the same levels of oxygen during the winter if it's lost its leaves as it is during the spring and summer. But an evergreen tree has that leaf cover year round. So if you have an evergreen tree that's close to a deciduous tree, during the time that the deciduous tree doesn't have its leaves, the evergreen tree can actually transmit oxygen to it. They're in the process of learning how, but it can actually transfer oxygen to the deciduous tree that's lost its leaves. So I see this as, again, reconceiving this as perhaps a pair of sisters, or that type of relationship, a type of nurturing relationship, that if you consider them paired together, close together like they are in my yard, it really is directly a matter of the evergreen holly tree providing the ability to survive to the oak as it goes through its period of dormancy, because it's expended all its energy providing food and shelter for birds and animals during its more dominant time. And then in the summer, when it is in full leaf and not in its dormant cycle, it's going to be able to produce oxygen at a greater rate than an evergreen tree that has either smaller leaves or needles. So it can give back. It can communicate back some of that nurturance that it's had during the time when it needed the help, needed the persistence, needed the continuity of the tree that is able to remain active through the winter months. Just a few thoughts. Maybe it's not a battle. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a kind of mutuality. It's a kind of caring for each other when we are strong and the other is weak, and but in reverse, the other will care for us when we're weak and they're the stronger. On that note, I wish you all blessings, and I wish you Happy New Year. Take care.